So these Babolat Pure Aeros are some of the best performing rackets in the world, but for many they offer one fatal flaw, and that's arm comfort. Now many brands have stepped in trying to offer these spin-oriented high-performance frames in a more comfortable package. We've got the Head Extremes, the Onyx V cores, and Dunlop SXs, and while each of these lines have their gems, none of them really make what I would actually describe as a more comfortable aero. That is, until now.
What are these even called?
Axis.
Okay.
Hundy and 98.
So we're reviewing the Diadem Hundy and 98. These are the
At least one World War II joke.
axis of spin. So this is Diadem's third line, the Axis. It's their spin line, and right off the bat I can tell you two things about them. Number one is the Axis is easily my favorite line from Diadems, and number two, these are the closest performing frames to the Babolat Aeros, with the Axis 100, that's this one, being legitimately switchable for my game. So how do they play? So the Axis 98 fits somewhere between the Pure Aero 98 and the RF01 300 gram. You've got this nice headlight, 315mm balance point that ensures great tip awareness and really facilitates this attacking all-court kind of tennis that we've seen from Roger Federer in the RF01 and Carlos Alcaraz in the Aero 98. The launch angle on the Axis is lower across the board than the Aero, which is nice for control, but the on-center control isn't quite up there with the RF, and like the RF, the Axis here has a little bit of launchiness off center. The hitting feel is pretty muted, but on the bright side, it's pretty solid feeling. The Axis 100, on the other hand, is actually quite unique with its unusually high balance point at 330mm. Oddly, this means it kind of sits between two of Babolat's own Aeros. We've got the undampened Rafa 290 and the very dampened Pure Aero 100 normal version. The swing feel on this Axis 100 is nearly identical to the Rafa, but with a more comfortable feel. Spin is absolutely phenomenal, power is quite decent, with control I would say being a little bit better on flat shots with this Axis than I get with my Rafa. Still, I would say the normal Aero 100 probably has the best control of the three frames because of that tighter 16:19 pattern, but it's also probably the most muted and the most dampened. But with all that said, I will say I think I prefer the feel of the normal Aero 100 to this Axis because of the hitting noise. The normal Aero is solid, thuddy, and lower pitched, but this Axis has kind of a high, tinny hitting sound, much like my Rafa does, but at least with my Rafa, I'm rewarded with this really connected and responsive feel. Instead here, I'm getting a very muted yet high-pitched, tinny, and honestly, it's just an off-putting hitting sound for me.
Alright, so we're going to play out some points with the Axis 98 and the 100 to see how they compare under pressure.
Now on court, this Axis 98 performs really well. I wouldn't say that there are any major letdowns, but
If I lose, I have to give Simon $10 million.
I also wouldn't say that there are any compelling strengths. Power and stability are both quite decent here. I'd say maybe a little bit below average for the spin segment, probably falling behind the V-Core 98, the Aero 98, the SX 300 Tour, but it's not like you can't hit a penetrating ball with this frame. I felt like I was hitting decent shots. In a lot of ways, I think this Axis 98 actually falls a little bit more in line with something like the Extreme Pro or the V-Core 95 as being like a spin control frame rather than a spin power frame that the mold might suggest, given the blatant homage to the Pure Aero kind of beam shape. The shots that I like best with this Axis were the same shots that I like to play with the RF01. Angled, flatter, tight spin forehands cross, taking it early, backhand slices, knifing it cross court, and I really enjoyed it on touch shots as well.
For me, this is like an aggressive attacking racket all day long.
On serves, I felt pretty dialed in. I could use all the serves that I typically go for. Slice wide on the deuce, jam body, slice down the tee on the deuce, flat down the tee, kick wide worked well, slice up the line on the ad side also worked really nicely. Basically, I wasn't second guessing any serve I wanted to hit first or second. I was pretty confident here. Now, when it comes to setups with this Axis 98, it was pretty easy for me to get this thing dialed in. I tried 3 different string setups. First, Otoro Orange, Sink in the Crosses, then Solstice Power, and finally what's in here now, which is Tourmaline Wasabi in the carbon gray color. When fresh, I think I probably like Solstice the best, but the quick notching meant that I only got to enjoy that setup for like 1 hit before the strings felt kind of worn out. But honestly, I don't think that this frame is that string sensitive. Like, I know that Solstice and Wasabi play very, very differently in other more string sensitive rackets like my old V1 Whiteout, but here they just didn't play that different. Like, Solstice is crisp, it's lively, it's supposed to keep you very connected to the racket, but it didn't get me that much more connected compared to Wasabi, which on the other hand is very muted and kind of dead feeling, especially in this gray color. I will say I also preferred lower tensions here. This one I strung up at 46, which is pretty low. I'm not usually stringing down in the mid 40s, but I didn't lose any control or predictability off the string bed down there, and all I did was gain some forgiveness off center, which I really liked. Customization wise, I liked it best at the specs that I'm going to put on screen, which meant adding a leather grip, 6 grams to the butt down here, and 3 grams up at the tip to get that swing weight cooking for myself.
On the other hand, the 100, its defensive play, spin, shape so much better.
The Axis 100 was an absolute breeze for me to test. This is easily the closest frame on the market from a performance standpoint to my Aero Rafa. So if the Aero Rafa didn't exist, this is likely the racket that I'd be using today. I can play basically every shot that I like to play, the ones that are important for my game, like looping cross-court forehands, driving inside-out approach shots, defensive stabbing backhands, and every serve that's typically in my arsenal. I will say that power is probably a half step behind what I'm used to with the Rafa, but control off the string bed I would say is slightly better, especially on those flatter attacking shots. Predictability was absolutely fantastic, and I really knew what to expect from the frame on all areas of the court. Simon also says that this is probably the racket that I hit the second best ball with after my Rafa, which is also really reassuring. Setups were just as easy. Immediately I tried the string that I'm liking the most in my Rafa today, which is Tourmaline Otoro Tour, and it was near perfect. Connected feel, heroic spin, predictable response, everything I like. I probably could have messed around a little more to get rid of this like tinny, high-pitched hitting noise from on-center contact, oddly enough. But from a performance perspective, this just offers everything that I'm looking for. In terms of customizations, I actually did like this racket a lot stock, but it was so easy for me to match this spec to my Rafa that I just did it to get myself really dialed in. That meant, in this case, 2 grams at 12, a VT Advantech leather grip, and 6 grams at 7 inches, so the top of the handle to get that MGRI dialed in.
All right, so Diadem Axis 98 versus 100. Which did you like better?
I think for me it'd be the 100 all day.
Yeah.
It just seems to build on what's good about the 98, but add more stability and forgiveness.
Yeah.
I think that, overall, both rackets for me play pretty well.
Yeah, like they're totally fine.
They're totally fine. I think I'm getting decent power, decent spin,
Yeah.
decent reliability
Your
on both.
spin with the 100 is noticeably more damaging. Like your overall ball effectiveness, I think, with the 100 is more damaging.
I'm a lot more confident with the 100 too. I feel like I can swing out a little bit smoother. I don't have to put as much effort in. I don't have to worry about my footwork so much, which is a little bit nicer. The 98 just has a little bit less stability. It's a little bit more unpredictable.
But even though maybe you're worrying more about your footwork with the 98, I think you played worse with it.
Yeah, it doesn't have as consistent a ball for me, for my play style.
Yeah. How does this Diadem Axis 98 compare to some other like key spin rackets that you're trying? Namely, this is obviously a copy of the Aero 98, which you used for a long time, and also competes very closely with your current racket you've been using the most. I don't know if it's your racket of choice fully, but the SX 300 Tour stands for Trey.
Running TennCom has given me a mental illness where I feel compelled to not commit to any one racket.
Yeah.
But I definitely been playing with this by far the most. And Beckett claims that I play the best with it, which strokes my ego quite a bit.
Yeah.
So,
So how does the Axis stack up compared to the Aero and the SX?
I just think you don't quite get the magic with this 98. I think it feels a bit more muted, a bit more like a gravity vibe on feel. I don't think it plays the same as a gravity, but the Dunlop has a lot more feedback, which I like. I think this is the best as far as feel-wise. The Aero is actually, I would say, worse feeling for me than this. It's just a more muted, bricky feel. Mm-hmm. So I would rank this at the top, this in the middle, Aero at the bottom as far as what I look for in a racket on court hitting the ball.
Because I think you play worse with this compared to the Aero 98.
Results oriented, I think
Yeah.
I might play the best with the Aero in my opinion.
I think you play better with this.
I play good with this too.
The
I
Aero
think I play worse
you
with
hit
this.
too flat with. Like,
Yeah.
you're too net skimmy and then you lose consistency. This one you get the best margin. This one you don't have the kind of margin, same as the Aero, but you just can't get away with anything.
But I think that comes back to what I like about this, which is the feedback. I can tell when I'm doing something wrong and kind of figure out why I'm doing it and make those corrections. Whereas when I'm with the Aero, I don't feel like I get that feedback. I don't quite know what I need to be changing about my approach to hitting. I haven't played long enough with this to really know if I have that or not, but I do feel like this gives me a little bit more information. I think I could make some adjustments with this. But
Favorite shot with the Axis?
I would actually say cross-court forehand. I was hitting some
That's
really
what
good
I
ones.
felt
Yeah.
too. Like, I wanted to find cross court and also backhand slice. I liked a lot.
Yeah, I like my backhand topspin with this a lot too.
So my final thoughts on the Diadem Axis rackets. These are pretty fine frames. They do most things pretty well, but at the end of the day, my issue with these rackets is that they kind of fail to stand out. When Simon tried these frames, the first thing he asked about was the price, and these diadems are basically the same price as flagship brands starting at $259. And maybe that price isn't that bad with Head, Wilson, and Babolat all increasing their prices due to tariffs, but these diadems are made in China too, so I've got to assume that at some point they're going to have to pass that tariff burden on to the consumer, which means you and me. But for a second, let's put that price and tariff thing to the side for a minute. Do these Diadem Axis offer the Pure Aero experience in a more comfortable package? Now, generally, I would say that yes, they do offer what you would expect, but I can't ignore the fact that they do so at a compromise. You get 80 to 90% of the performance, but the comfort is only 5% better. Worse still, the additional comfort from the softer layup and excessive dampening means that the overall hitting experience with both of these frames is quite disconnected. No shot is that rewarding. You don't have this purity on contact that just fills you with satisfaction the way that you'd get with a Gravity Tour or a T-Fight. My Pure Aero Rafa is tremendously rewarding to hit cleanly, and the Aero 98 is pretty dang rewarding as well. Comparing the two, I'd say this Axis 100 is probably a little more rewarding than the 98, but I think that's dumb. 98s are supposed to be rewarding. Why else would we use them? This Axis 98 shouldn't have just offered better comfort than the Aero. It should have also brought along better feel, and it doesn't. Somehow, it's even more muted than the Aero 98, and there's some hoop bending towards the tip that just punishes you against those bigger hitters. I'd personally way rather use a lot of other rackets in the segment over this Axis 98, including the Extreme Pro, the VCore 98, the SX300 Tour, and the Aero 98, simply because the feel just isn't that rewarding. Bad shots feel bad and good shots just feel fine. I don't see what the point is. And that said, this 100 is definitely something I could go to a tournament and play with, though I just know I'd always be thinking that my Rafa is better. I just wish I had the Rafa, and I personally far preferred the general playing and hitting experience of something like a T-Fight 300S or this V2 Blackout I've been testing.
Today we're reviewing the Diadem Axis 98 and 100. I can't tell if they're German or Italian, but we'll see, depending on their play style. We'll find out.
Alright, I don't want to play with either of these rackets anymore. Time to use a racket I actually like, which is this print